Welcome up! In this episode we will talk about monarchies, absolute versus constitutional. Coming up. Hello, I'm Understanding Politics, and in this channel I explain political theories and debates to students as well as curious and passionate people, just like you. Monarchy is the rule of one. It comes from the Greek monos, single, and archo, command or rule. This form of government rests on the idea that sovereignty, absolute power, is undivided. In a monarchy, power is inherited, and most monarchies allow only male succession. A monarchy usually consists of two main elements: a government of the state and a court and related ceremonies. While the government of the state is straightforward, courts are the social life of the members of the dynasty. Historically, monarchies emerged in ancient times because of wars. Given that states survived by going at war with one another and acquiring new territories, the military leaders of armies were often monarchs. Or monarchs were expected to become military leaders. Think of the Roman Empire, where indeed emperors were monarchs constantly at war. Now, there is a fundamental distinction to do when we talk about monarchies, because they are not all the same. We can have absolute monarchies and constitutional monarchies. An absolute monarchy is a situation where the king or queen incarnates all powers of the state. That's why he or she has absolute rule. This was a pretty common situation in pre-modern history. If the monarch had also religious responsibilities, then we were talking of a theocratic regime. I'm planning to do a video about theocracy as regime, so please hold on a little. If the absolute monarch did not have religious responsibilities, then the country was a simple autocracy and not a theocracy. This became a common situation in the Middle Age, and usually after the advent of Christianism in Europe. In the Middle Age, philosophy usually talked about the distinction between temporal power, which is the power on the world, and spiritual power, which is the power of what comes beyond. According to this principle, the Pope, or the spiritual authority of that particular religion, vested spiritual power, while the monarch incarnated the temporal one. As you may know, this topic characterized political debates for centuries. This is also why, for instance, the coronation of Charlemagne in 800 was such a symbolic act. By means of clarity, Napoleon was an emperor but also a monarch, because he ruled alone. Empire is a term that qualifies the state in its territoriality, but usually emperor is a synonym for monarch, which is a synonym for autocrat. Constitutional monarchies are a totally different thing. Basically, a constitutional monarchy is an absolute monarchy affected by liberalism. I invite you to check my video on liberalism to learn more about the topic. In a constitutional monarchy, the powers of the monarch are limited by the constitution. The constitution usually attributes powers based on the idea that the sovereign power is not of the monarch, but of the people. People allow the monarch to exercise its functions, but limited by what has been established by the constitution. The French Revolution, the English Glorious Revolution, were both, to some extent, revolts of the bourgeoisie, the middle class of economic producers, that wanted to limit the powers of the king. So, as classic as liberalism goes, it started with the Bill of Rights in England and with the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizens in France. Rights such as the right to property, the right not to be armed, or the right of expression had to be guaranteed and could not be decided unilaterally by the king. Similarly, the principle no taxation without representation limited the power of the king to impose taxes on the producing class to wage his useless war. From that moment, the Parliament of Representatives became responsible for handling the taxation. From those revolutions, we have the philosophies of Locke and Montesquieu that introduced the principle of the separation of powers. Over time, rights extended, powers evolved, and the monarch remained the symbol of state without exercising any real power. This is true in Western Europe, including the UK, Belgium, Sweden, or Spain. As far as constitutionalism goes, monarchs are the equivalent of presidents of republics in parliamentary democracies. On the contrary, in presidential systems of liberal democracies, such as in the US, while being the head of state, a president holds much more power than a king or queen in a constitutional democracy. To simplify the discussion and conclude, there are two main versions of monarchy: absolute and constitutional. The former is an autocracy where the monarch retains all powers of the state, while the latter is a liberal democracy where powers are effectively separated and the monarch has but a symbolic function. The lecture is over. As usual, you can find the sources in the references section of the description. Thank you for watching. If you look at the map of 2018 by National Geographic, you see there are a number of states ruled through monarchy. In violet, we have parliamentary constitutional monarchies. In dark green, constitutional monarchies, assuming these are slightly less democratic versions. And in red, we have absolute monarchies, such as Saudi Arabia or Oman. Take this map with a grain of salt, as not all of these are correct identifications. Kazakhstan, for example, is semi-presidential. Still, in the world, monarchies are not so many, and most of them are still part of the British Commonwealth. So Canada, Australia and New Zealand have still Elizabeth as their head of state. As you know from recent news, Barbados has transitioned to republic and elected its first female president.